projector flickered once, coughing light across the polished Navy insignia at the front of the Pentagon's war room. 80 officers in pressed uniforms murmured as the SEAL Admiral cleared his throat. The air smelled of cold metal, disinfectant, and coffee left too long on a burner. He looked at me, smile thin, voice rich with performance. Your call sign? What is it? Cupcake? Laughter cracked through the room like static. Boots shifted, pens tapped. Someone snorted near the back. I kept my hands folded on the table, fingers brushing the embroidered Reaper patch stitched into my flight jacket sleeve. The thread had frayed from heat and time, a dark outline against regulation gray. I met his eyes. Reaper 0. Silence hit like a break. You could hear the fluorescent buzz overhead and the faint hum of ventilation, the sound of respect waking up too late. The Admiral's grin faltered. His shoulders straightened, instinctively aware of rank suddenly rearranging itself in the room. A few chairs creaked as officers stopped pretending to take notes. At the back of the hall, one man didn't move at all. My father, Admiral Thomas Ward. His face was pale stone under the cold white light. The same mouth that had once said, "You'll never earn a name worth remembering." He blinked once, slow, and looked away. The SEAL Admiral, Dalton, cleared his throat. Didn't mean offense, Commander, just breaking the ice. Looks like the ice broke itself, I said quietly. No one laughed. He tried again. Well, we've all heard of the legend, haven't we? The ghost pilot from Helmand? That was you? I let the silence answer. The question wasn't really curiosity. It was disbelief searching for a foothold. Dalton looked down at his notes, found nothing to save him, and said, moving on. But the room didn't move on with him. The silence stayed. I kept my face still, calm as an altimeter needle in perfect trim. Inside, I was somewhere else entirely. Inside another room, smaller, warmer, crueler. The memory came back in the smell of jet fuel and starch. I was 12, standing in the kitchen of our Virginia house, still in my school uniform. My father sat at the table in his undershirt, ribbons from his dress blues laid neatly beside his coffee mug. He was polishing his medals one by one with the care of a surgeon. Dad, I'd said, holding up the folded letter from the junior aviation program. They picked me for the simulator training. He didn't look up. Simulator? You're not flying anything real. They said I've got a feel for it. They said I could apply for flight prep when I'm older. He sighed, slow and heavy. Elise, ward men fly, ward women watch. That's not cruelty, it's order. I remember the smell of metal polish, the faint chemical sweetness of pride. I remember the silence afterward, long enough to hear the tick of his wedding ring against the metal he was cleaning. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority, when you grow up with it, doesn't have to shout. He handed me a coin from the table, his first deployment coin. Keep this, he said. Something real, not paper wings. I held it like a blessing, though it felt more like a debt. That night, I took the coin to my room and balanced it on the windowsill, watching the moonlight catch its edges. The etching read, "Courage is discipline." I traced the words with my thumb until the skin turned red. Then I hid it inside a shoebox under my bed. The next morning, I woke before dawn and wrote my first application for flight school. I used the kitchen table, same seat he always took. The ink bled a little on the cheap paper, but I kept going until my signature looked sure. That was the first rebellion, quiet, neat, invisible. The kind that doesn't announce itself until years later, when someone tries to take your name away and finds it's already engraved. The hum of the projector in the war room brought me back. Dalton was talking again, voice clipped, nervous now. We'll review extraction protocols shortly. But let's remember, combat isn't a fairy tale, folks. It's procedure, not ghost stories. I opened my folder, flipped through the pages without looking at them. Each one smelled faintly of toner and jet fuel, the scent of proof. Across the table, Captain Lena Morales caught my eye. She didn't speak, didn't smile, but the small tilt of her head said what words couldn't. Hold the line. I did. Dalton kept talking. Some of these reports, frankly, are exaggerated. Pilots taking credit for team efforts. His voice broke against the silence. He knew what the room knew. Exaggerations don't leave black box data and signed confirmation reports. He adjusted his tie, turned off the projector, and muttered, "Let's adjourn for 10. Commander Ward, a word outside?" I followed him into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed louder there, the kind of sound that makes you feel interrogated by air itself. He faced me. "I didn't mean to disrespect you." "You didn't," I said. "You disrespected yourself." He frowned. "You have quite a tone for someone with a classified record." "Respect has clearance above classification, Admiral." He didn't reply. The silence between us stretched taut. Then he turned on his heel and left. Behind me, I heard the door open. My father stepped out of the room. His ribbons gleamed in the hallway's white light, same as always. Cold, impeccable, untouchable. "Elise," he said, his voice somewhere between pride and irritation. "You made quite the impression." "I learned from the best," I said. His jaw tightened. "Don't mistake defiance for achievement." "And don't mistake rank for respect," I said. He didn't answer, just looked at the Reaper patch on my sleeve and shook his head. "You still chasing ghosts?" "Maybe," I said, "but some ghosts rescue the living." He turned away before I could see whether that hit home. That night in my quarters, I unpacked my flight bag. The patch itched where it brushed my skin, the embroidery rough and familiar. I ran a finger over it. The fabric was warm, still holding the static of the day. I thought of his words again. Ward women watch. Every syllable still carried the weight of a verdict, but I had rewritten it long ago. Ward women fly. Outside, the runway lights blinked in slow rhythm, guiding planes into the dark. Each one was a pulse, a promise. The next morning, the classified mission that made me Reaper Zero would finally demand its truth, and the men who doubted it would find their names printed under mine. The desert doesn't roar. It whispers like something enormous trying to remember its own language. Helmand Province, 0300 hours. Sand hissed across the fuselage in long, sliding sighs. Inside the cockpit, the world was a trembling orange haze. "Visibility 0.2, Morales said from the co-pilot seat, her voice clipped by static. "Copy." My hands rested light on the cyclic, fingers damp inside the gloves. Every instrument needle jittered like it was nervous for us. The sky was a storm of grit and electricity, lightning spiderwebbing in the distance. The smell of ozone and burning dust seeped through the vents. "Ward, command says abort, storm closing." "Command isn't inside it," I said. "We are." Morales glanced at me. The flight helmet reflected a pulse of lightning. One white frame of her eyes, calm, waiting. "You sure?" "No," I said. "But we're still going." 12 soldiers were trapped 12 clicks out, pinned in a wadi that command had already written off. "No comms, low fuel, one corridor left, if you could call a knife edge of open air a corridor." Morales toggled the black box recorder. "Audio live." "Good," I said. "Let history have ears." We dipped into the storm. The first gust slammed us sideways, the harness biting my shoulders. The rotors shuddered. The aircraft moaned. Sand hit the windshield like buckshot. Each grain scratching the glass with the sound of static turned solid. I could taste metal on my tongue, the electric tang of the storm bleeding through the cockpit. "Altitude 500, 470, 450. "Hold it," I said. "The ridge will block some of it." Morales gave a dry laugh. "That's optimism talking." "Call it geometry." Lightning flashed again, and for half a second the ridge appeared, black and bone-sharp against the storm. I angled us lower, hugging the shadow. The storm howled, then dropped like it had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. The instrument steadied. "Windows open," I said. "Then let's go save some ghosts." We found them by their emergency strobes, tiny, desperate blinks in the sand. 12 lives, 12 small lights. When they saw the bird drop through the storm, they waved, disbelief plain, even through the grainy night vision feed. We hovered 30 feet above the wadi floor. The rotors flattened the sand in circles. The downwash felt like the desert trying to rise against us. "Load 1, secure. Load 2, injured. Load 3, missing leg." Each call punched through the headset like a heartbeat. Then out of nowhere, the wind shifted, slamming up the valley. The aircraft pitched. The world tilted left. I fought it, muscles burning, harness cutting across my ribs. Morales shouted, "Abort! We'll flip!" "No time," I yelled back. "We're finishing it." Something in the storm screamed, a sound between thunder and the tearing of cloth. And then we were through. Load 12, secure. Confirmed, I said. Wait, we're done. Let's bring them home. When we climbed above the ridge, the world below vanished completely, just blank, living dust. But the GPS still pulsed, a tiny red heartbeat on the screen. I aimed for it. When the first tower lights appeared through the sand, I laughed once, sharp and breathless. We touched down on fumes. 12 men stepped off. One of them, tall, face streaked with dust, turned back and saluted. His voice cracked through the headset before I killed the power. "Whoever you are, thank you." The rotors slowed. The wind died. Silence, the kind that hums with aftershock, filled the world. Later, in the debrief tent, the air smelled of sweat, diesel, and paper. An intelligence officer scribbled notes like he was trying to erase me with speed. "Pilot name?" "Classified," Morales said before I could answer. The officer frowned. "For records?" "Reaper 0, Morales said. He wrote it down like a joke, not a title. It stuck anyway. Weeks later, Washington called it unconfirmed heroics. My father called it reckless luck. When the report leaked to senior command, he phoned me for the first time in months. His tone was surgical, sterile. "I heard you flew blind." "I flew alive," I said. "You could have died." "I didn't." He paused, then delivered the verdict. "Luck isn't skill, Elise. Wardmen earn their names. You borrow them." Then the click of the receiver, clean, final. I sat there in the barracks, the static of that line still ringing. The sand was still in my boots. I hadn't washed it out yet. It felt earned. Morales found me later, sitting on the hangar steps, boots off, sand spilling between my fingers like gold dust. "Heard from the brass?" she asked. "From my father." "Same thing?" "Worse." She sat down beside me, stretching her legs. The evening smelled of jet fuel and rain that hadn't fallen yet. "He doesn't get it," she said. "He doesn't want to. You ever going to make him?" "I'm going to make him watch," she smiled. "That's colder." "No," I said. "That's weather." Back in the present, Pentagon hallway 20 months later, the sound of that storm still lived in my ears. Dalton's laughter had just replaced it. I stood by the wall after the briefing ended, the others filing out. The marble underfoot gleamed like ice. Morales joined me, folder under her arm. "He doesn't know what he's laughing at." "He will." "You've still got the black box data?" "And the signature." "His?" "Stamped in red." She nodded, satisfied. "Then let the weather change." That night, I reopened the Hellman file. The edges of the paper were curled, the ink faintly blurred from humidity. The Reaper patch lay beside it, faded, burned at one corner from rotor exhaust. The only proof I ever needed. But proof alone never changes men who confuse power with truth. So I added something to the folder. A copy of the signed seal confirmation, bearing Mark Dalton's signature. The same man who mocked me now had once certified that flight's success. It was poetic, in the way storms sometimes are, the same wind that breaks you can clear the air. I closed the folder and looked out through the barracks window. Washington's skyline glowed with aircraft lights, tiny red dots tracing patterns that only pilots can read. Each one of them carried someone who'd had to prove they belonged. I whispered to the glass, to the reflection of my own Reaper patch. Storm's coming again. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel dread. I felt flight. By dawn, my proof was packed. The same men who once called me a myth were about to learn what ghosts look like when they walk into the room. The Pentagon lights never really turn off. They just dim enough to make you forget you're still awake. The war room windows looked out over the Potomac, a river of cold light moving without sound. I'd been there since before sunrise, the Reaper patch stitched to my sleeve like a heartbeat under fabric. The folder lay open in front of me. Black box transcript, flight telemetry, one signature stamped in red ink. Admiral Mark Dalton, Operation Review, extraction confirmed. The irony smelled like toner and arrogance. He had once certified my survival. Now he was going to deny it. I ran a hand over the folder's edge, the paper warm from the desk lamp. Every mission teaches you its own weather. This one was clear. Let the storm come, but stay in its eye. Morales entered without knocking. Her shadow stretched across the wall like a wing in motion. You're early, I said. You're not sleeping, she replied. Didn't plan to. She set down a thermos. The scent of strong coffee filled the air, burnt, sharp, grounding. You're really going through with this? I nodded. You know your father's on that panel. Dalton, too. That's why. She studied my face as if checking for cracks. You could walk away, you know. Let the record speak for itself. The record's been whispering for years, I said. It's time they hear it. Morales gave a dry laugh. That's not rebellion. That's a storm warning. Exactly. When I first learned to fly, I thought the hardest part was altitude. It wasn't. It was judgment. Knowing when to trust the instruments and when to trust your gut. Command loves instruments. Fathers love order. But sometimes your gut is the only thing that tells the truth. I checked the time. 06:30. The briefing would start at 900. 3 hours to prepare for war without weapons. I gathered the evidence with methodical calm. Mission audio. Clipped, wind-torn, but clear enough to prove precision under chaos. Sensor data, altitude, wind velocity, rotor torque. Dalton's signature dated the night after the extraction. And finally, a photograph. 12 SEALs standing under the sandstorm's bruised sky, their faces shadowed, one of them raising a thumb toward the camera. Commander Ryan Cross, the man whose voice I still heard saying, "Whoever you are, thank you." That man would be in the audience today. He didn't know I was Reaper Zero. He would soon. At 0800, my father called. The name Admiral Thomas Ward flashed across my phone like a code I'd sworn not to answer. But storms demand confrontation. I picked up. Elise. Admiral. He ignored the barb. You're scheduled for a joint review. You'll keep it professional. I always do. You've built quite a reputation. For competence? For insubordination disguised as it. His voice had that clipped calm that always preceded a strike. Dalton tells me you're bringing up the Helmand mission. Yes. You don't have to. I do. Elise. You told me ward men fly and ward women watch. I watched the horizon that night until it opened. If that's insubordination, so be it. Silence stretched. For once, he didn't interrupt. Then quietly, you always did have your mother's stubbornness. She called it courage, I said. Courage gets people killed. No, arrogance does. He didn't answer. The line clicked dead. I looked at the phone until the screen dimmed, reflecting my own face. I didn't see anger. I saw the calm before flight. The war room filled like a tide. 80 officers, 2 admirals, 1 truth. The air smelled of floor wax and cold coffee. The kind of sterile air where people mistake control for authority. I entered quietly, helmet under my arm, folder clutched like a map. Morales stood near the back, her posture steady, unreadable. My father sat among the panel, silver hair, metal straight as a sermon. Dalton stood beside him, posture easy, smirk rehearsed. He leaned toward my father and said something that made both men chuckle. I didn't need to hear it. I'd grown up fluent in condescension. The meeting began with protocol. Dalton took the floor first, voice rich with experience. Today we're reviewing tactical extraction failures and mythologized success narratives. That last phrase made a few lieutenants shift in their seats. Everyone knew which myth he meant. He clicked a remote. A satellite map appeared. Helmand Ridge. Case study. An unverified operation from 5 years ago. Reported rescue of 12 personnel during a sandstorm. Mission logs incomplete, comms lost, pilot identity, classified. We're here to clarify records. Clarify. His favorite synonym for Barry. He smirked. Some call this pilot Reaper Zero. Personally, I think ghost stories belong in bars, not briefings. Laughter, hesitant, nervous. My father smiled faintly, lips tight. That was my cue. Permission to speak, Admiral. Dalton turned, surprised by the formality. Granted, Commander Ward. I stood, sliding the folder onto the table. The click of metal against wood was soft, but it cut through the laughter like a blade. Then let's clarify. I opened the folder, spreading each page like cards on a table, data columns, maps, and at the center, the black box transcript. Dalton frowned. My father's brows knit. This is the unverified mission you mentioned, I said. 12 personnel, Ridge Corridor, flight log attached. Dalton tried to laugh it off. You brought bedtime reading? No, I said. I brought your signature. The room stilled. He blinked. What? Here. I pointed to the red stamp. Admiral Mark Dalton, extraction confirmed. The silence turned surgical. Someone near the back murmured, That can't be real. It's archived, I said. Authorization number? I read the digits aloud. You signed it the night after the operation. Dalton looked at the page, color draining from his face. My father's pen froze mid-note. I continued, voice even. You certified the mission yourself. I flew that bird. He swallowed hard. You're saying you're Reaper Zero? I'm not saying it. You are. The words dropped like ordnance. Then nothing. No cough, no paper shuffle, no breath. Dalton's jaw worked, trying to find a defense. That file was sealed. Not from you, I said. Or me. Morales met my eyes from the back. Steady, ready. Dalton turned to the crowd, searching for allies. Well, classification means anyone could have... From the audience, a man's voice cut through, quiet but strong. Not anyone. Ryan Cross stood. His uniform was simple, but his presence wasn't. He looked directly at Dalton. She's right. I was there. Reaper Zero saved us. Murmurs swelled like wind before rain. Officers turned in their seats, whispering, recognizing the name. Dalton stared, face collapsing inward. Commander Cross? Cross nodded once. You signed my debrief, too. Dalton's shoulders dropped. My father sat motionless. Cross turned to me. We never knew who you were. Until now. I nodded. The mission wasn't about names. Today it is, he said. My father's pen rolled off the table, clattering onto the marble floor. He bent to pick it up, but his hand shook. When he looked up, he didn't see a daughter. He saw a pilot who had earned every inch of the air she flew through. Dalton's silence was the first salute. The second would make the whole room stand. The war room had changed temperature. It wasn't just silence now, it was pressure, thick and electric. Every eye turned toward Dalton, the man whose signature sat glowing red under the projector light. He looked at the document like it was something alive and venomous. My father still hadn't spoken. His knuckles were white against the tabletop. The sound of the air vent droned faintly, filling the vacuum of authority. Dalton cleared his throat, but the words came rough. This doesn't prove... Proves enough, Cross said. He remained standing, shoulders square, voice even. Ma'am, that night you came through the storm. No one else could have made that flight. Dalton tried to recover his command voice. We don't debrief fairy tales in the Pentagon. Cross turned toward him, tone crisp. With respect, Admiral, I'm alive because of that fairy tale. The tension snapped. The room wasn't with Dalton anymore. I could feel it. Shift of weight, breaths held, loyalty deciding where to land. I reached for the folder, slid the photograph across the table. 12 SEALs in a grainy night shot, helmets off, storm wind bending the flag behind them. You signed this mission report, I said. You also signed this photograph for confirmation. Check the corner. He did. His initials, tiny, perfect, undeniable. His voice cracked. I didn't... You did, I said softly. You believed in the legend before you realized the legend was me. No one moved. The air thickened with the sound of revelation landing. Morales, near the back, stepped forward. Sir, the data's valid. I ran the telemetry myself. Every line matches her bird's tail number. Dalton's jaw twitched. You're defending a subordinate over command? I'm defending facts, she said. They don't salute rank. My father finally spoke. Enough. The word rolled through the room, not loud, but weighted with the kind of authority that makes people straighten instinctively. He stood, adjusting the edge of his jacket as if to buy himself a second to choose who he'd be. Elise, he said, why didn't you tell me? The question wasn't accusation. It was disbelief dressed as confession. You wouldn't have heard it, I said. He looked at Dalton, then at the officers watching him. This mission, Helmand, was real? Cross answered, as real as any storm I've ever bled through. The Admiral's face, my father's, changed then. Not softened, not broken, just stripped. The man who had believed lineage could replace merit was staring at proof that bloodlines don't fly aircraft. Discipline does. He sat down slowly, gaze never leaving me. You carried our name well, he said. Better than I ever did. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't look away. I carried my own, I said. Dalton sank into his chair, voice small. This was classified. How did you— I didn't break clearance, I said. I just didn't hide behind it. He looked around, desperate for rescue. There was none. Even the junior officers were still, uncertain whether to breathe or salute. Cross spoke again. Permission to address the room, sir? My father nodded. Granted. Cross faced the officers. There's a saying among us. If you can't see the pilot, you trust the storm. That night, we trusted the storm. Turns out it had a name, Reaper Zero. He turned toward me and saluted. Ma'am, my team stands for you. It started with him. Then another officer stood, then another. 80 uniforms rising one by one, the shuffle of boots loud and deliberate until the room was a forest of bodies and silence. Dalton remained seated, head bowed, shoulders caved inward. His career, his ego, both finally grounded. My father hesitated, then stood too. Slowly. Deliberately. The sound of fabric rustling as he lifted his hand. This time not as a father, but as an officer saluting one. His voice cracked. Lieutenant Commander Ward, permission to salute. I nodded. Permission granted. The air felt alive. The stillness of respect has a sound. You hear it in the hush between breaths, in the metal whisper of metals touching fabric. Dalton finally looked up. You had to humiliate me to prove yourself? I shook my head. No. I had to tell the truth loud enough that even your silence could hear it. He blinked, something human flickering through the wreckage of pride. You were better than me out there. I was prepared, I said. Storms don't care about arrogance. He exhaled, long and slow, then nodded once. It wasn't surrender. It was recognition. I turned back to the room. 80 officers standing, waiting. Sit down, I said. No one moved. I smiled faintly. At ease, gentlemen. Respect's lighter when it's shared. They relaxed, slowly, but the energy stayed. The kind of silence that means the story will live longer than the people who witnessed it. I closed the folder, slid it under my arm, and turned to my father. The day I graduated flight school, you mailed me a line, remember? His eyes flickered. Ward men fly, Ward women watch. I nodded. Today you watched. His lips parted as if to speak, but the words didn't come. He didn't need them. The salute was enough. Cross approached as the officers began to file out. Hell of a way to break a myth, he said quietly. Truth doesn't break, I said. It lands. He grinned. Then today was a good landing. Smooth, I said. And overdue. Morales joined us, smirking. I'm going to need that black box for training modules. Legend's official now. Make sure the data stays louder than the story, I said. Always, she said. As we left the war room, I glanced back once. Dalton was still seated, staring at the empty projector screen. His reflection flickered faintly in its pale light. A man erased by the very truth he had mocked. My father stood near the doorway, watching me. His expression was unreadable. Half pride, half apology. He didn't speak, just gave a slow, deliberate nod. I returned it, then turned away. Outside, the corridor's air smelled faintly of rain and paper. Washington's brand of repentance. My steps echoed sharp against the marble. For once, the echo didn't sound lonely. It sounded earned. That night, my father found me again. Not to lecture, but to listen. And for the first time, he used my call sign like it meant respect. The corridor outside the war room had emptied to silence. Even the echo of boots had faded, leaving only the hum of the old air vents and the faint metallic rhythm of rain striking the window panes. I stood by the glass wall, folder tucked beneath my arm, watching the reflection of my father's figure approach. The hallway light made the metals on his chest gleam faintly, like relics remembering their purpose. He stopped 2 paces behind me. Elise. I turned, slow. Admiral. For a heartbeat, the word father nearly slipped out. I kept it caged. He exhaled through his nose, a sound I'd grown up mistaking for disappointment, but now understood it was restraint. You didn't need to make that public. Yes, I said I did. He studied me, unreadable. You've always loved spectacle. I loved truth, I said. Spectacle was yours, his jaw tensed. You humiliated a flag officer in front of 80 men. No, I said. I reminded 80 men who they actually serve. That shut him down. The silence between us stretched long enough to hear the rain change rhythm. He looked at the floor, then at the patch on my sleeve. Reaper Zero, he said, testing the words like a language he didn't quite believe. That was really you. Yes. I read that report. I thought it was a myth. You did, I said. And you laughed with him when he mocked it. His eyes flicked up, sharp and ashamed all at once. You think I'm proud of that moment? I don't think you're anything, I said. That's the problem. He winced like I'd struck him. You've changed. I grew up, I said. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, an old stance from when I was a cadet getting scolded. The authority was gone, but the posture remained. When your mother died, I didn't know how to raise a daughter. I only knew how to raise sailors. Then maybe stop trying to make them the same thing, I said. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. Maybe. He glanced toward the war room door. Dalton won't recover from this. He'll survive, I said. Men like him always do. They'll just fly lower for a while. He studied my face again, as if mapping the years between us. You're better than I was. I didn't want better, I said. I wanted equal. That cracked something. His eyes softened. The command in his shoulders slackened. You earned it, he said quietly. I stepped closer, holding out the folder. Then sign it. Make the record match the truth. He hesitated, then took the pen clipped to his breast pocket and scrawled his name across the last page. The sound of ink on paper, simple, final, beautiful. When he handed it back, I saw his hand tremble. He straightened. I was wrong. You earned every name they gave you. I nodded once. Then remember it. He lifted his hand, slow, deliberate, and saluted me. Not the stiff, perfunctory motion of ceremony, but something older, smaller, honest. For a second, the air between us felt different, less like a battlefield, more like a clearing after one. He dropped his hand. I'll see you at the memorial next month. I'll be there, I said. He started down the hall, the sound of his steps fading. I didn't follow. That night, the base was quiet again. Washington rain fell steady, making the runways shimmer under the sodium lamps. Morales found me sitting on the hangar stairs, helmet beside me, folder finally closed for good. You did it, she said. I did what was necessary. Same thing, she said, sitting beside me. You okay? I thought about it. I'm not sure okay fits anymore. She smiled faintly. You'll find a better word. The hangar smelled like metal and damp concrete, that particular scent of endings. In the distance, a jet roared to life, a ribbon of sound tearing through the rain. Morales said quietly, Cross told me they're naming the training module after the Helmand rescue. I looked at her. What name? She grinned. Reaper Zero Flight Dynamics. I laughed once, low. That'll irritate Command. That's the point. We sat in silence, watching the rain dance in the hangar lights. You ever think about what happens after storms? She asked. They move, I said. They don't stop, they just change shape. Like truth. Exactly. Hours later, in my quarters, I laid the helmet on the desk. Its surface caught the reflection of the city lights through the window. Gold, fractured, alive. The Reaper insignia still glinted, though some of the paint had chipped away. I traced the edges with my thumb, feeling the roughness. I thought of my father's salute, the same hand that once pointed me towards silence, now raised in respect. It wasn't forgiveness, it was evolution. From the window, I could see the Washington Monument rising through mist like a blade cutting the horizon. The kind of monument that pretends time stands still, when in truth, everything shifts beneath it. I whispered the words more to the air than to myself. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned in storms. Outside, lightning flashed once, far away over the Potomac. For a heartbeat, I saw its reflection in the helmet visor. It looked almost like wings. At the memorial, a month later, my father stood in the front row. His uniform was perfect, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. He didn't need to speak. I laid the medal on the podium beneath his photograph. His, not mine. Voice steady, I said, "He taught me rank was power. I learned honor was silence under fire." The audience didn't clap. They stood. Every one of them. I saluted, turned, and walked toward the sunlight cutting across the floor. Behind me, the flag shifted slightly in the air conditioning, the faint sound of fabric like wings catching wind. Respect doesn't arrive with applause, it lands when silence stands. The museum smelled faintly of waxed oak and cold metal, memory preserved under glass. Naval Aviation Heritage Hall, Pensacola. Rows of flight suits hung in perfect symmetry, the air-conditioned silence thick enough to feel sacred. Every few feet, a nameplate gleamed. Every one of them had been doubted once. In the center display behind tempered glass was the Reaper Zero flight patch. Burnt at one corner, thread unraveling, color faded to a dull silver. The plaque beneath it didn't mention the mission or the rank or even the year. It carried just one word, etched in brass. Earned. I stood there longer than I meant to. The reflection of the patch hovered over my chest, perfectly aligned with the one still stitched on my flight jacket. Morales appeared beside me, hands in her pockets. "They didn't want to add your name," she said. "Thought anonymity was classier." "Good," I said. "It was never about my name." "It was," she smirked. "Try telling that to the cadets outside taking selfies with the display." I smiled faintly. Let them have their heroes. We had our storms. We stood there in the hush of aviation ghosts, the hum of the building's vents like a steady engine. Through the skylight, sunlight poured across the floor in long stripes. It reminded me of a runway, of flight paths, of returns, of starts that don't always need finishes. After the museum ceremony, they invited me to give a short talk to the cadets. I'd written nothing down. Words rehearsed sound dishonest. They gathered in the training hall, bright-eyed and restless, the same kind of arrogance I used to mistake for courage. I stepped to the podium, feeling the Reaper patch rough against my arm. The microphone crackled once. "I was asked to speak about storms," I said. "But storms don't need introductions. They find you when you've stopped expecting them." A quiet ripple of laughter, nervous, respectful. "I flew through one once," I continued. "The kind that doesn't end when you land. The kind that waits for you in boardrooms, in briefings, in your own family dinners. You don't beat those storms with speed. You outlast them with silence." Every head was tilted forward now. You can feel when truth hits an age that's still learning it. "One of you asked me earlier how you know when you've made it." I smiled. "You don't. You just keep showing up when the wind gets loud until the people who doubted you stop shouting over the noise." I looked out across the room. Faces so young they didn't yet know what exhaustion feels like when it becomes purpose. "Some storms break radios, ideas," I said. "Others break pride. Both teach you who you are." When I stepped down, there was no applause, just silence. The right kind. The kind that lands. Later outside the hall, I saw Ryan Cross waiting by the memorial wall. He'd left the SEALs 2 years ago, walked away with a limp, a medal, and a quiet life. He still carried himself like someone who'd rather listen than talk. "You clean up well, Commander," he said. "Retirement looks good on you," I replied. He nodded toward the museum behind us. "Feels strange seeing it under glass, doesn't it?" "Proof always does," I said. "Once it's safe, it stops breathing." He looked at me, half smiling. "You know, some of us still tell that story." "About the storm?" "About the ghost pilot. Reaper Zero. We use it to remind recruits that real heroes never announce themselves. I met his gaze. Then maybe stop telling it. Let them earn their own legends. He chuckled. You really don't like being remembered, do you? I don't mind being remembered, I said. I just mind being misquoted. He laughed quietly, then grew serious. Your father would have liked this ceremony. He did, I said, in his own way. Cross looked surprised. He reached out. Before he passed, I said, left a letter, shortest one he ever wrote. What did it say? Ward women fly. He smiled, slow, genuine. Guess storms change people, too. They strip them clean, I said. What's left usually tells the truth. That evening, after everyone left, I walked alone through the museum one last time. The janitors had turned off half the lights. The quiet hummed. When I passed the Reaper patch display, I stopped again. For the first time, I let my hand rest against the glass. It was cold, smooth, steady, like the calm above a storm. Behind me, the faint sound of flag fabric shifting. Wind from the open door. The same rhythm as rotor blades slowing after landing. I whispered, half to the patch, half to the memory of a voice that used to call me reckless. I flew straight, even when you didn't watch. And for a moment, I swore I could hear him answer, not in words, but in silence that meant finally. Outside, the night was clear. The runway lights blinked in patient sequence. A training jet took off in the distance, the sound splitting the dark sky in two. I watched it climb, steady, relentless, unbothered by gravity. Morales' voice replayed in my head from years ago. You ever think about what happens after storms? I knew the answer now. They don't vanish. They just drift, leaving the air cleaner than before. I started walking toward the gate, the cool air brushing my sleeve. The Reaper patch caught the moonlight, and for an instant it glowed, alive again, breathing through thread and scar. At the gate, a young cadet saluted me. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted, I said. Is it true, what they say, that you flew through a sandstorm blind? I smiled. No, I just trusted what I couldn't see. He lowered his hand, thinking. That's kind of terrifying. Good, I said. Fear keeps you honest. He nodded, uncertain, and walked off. I turned toward the sky one last time, the air tasting faintly of salt and jet fuel, the perfume of every ending that was really just another flight. When arrogance speaks loud, let your silence speak louder. Subscribe for more stories of quiet courage and earned honor.